Hello and welcome back to No Bullshit. Today we turn to talking about the upcoming and highly anticipated video game release called Death Stranding. This game has been a long time coming too. In fact, the first image released and the first announcement about it came all the way back in 2016. And actually, come to find out, that picture that came out secretly revealed the release date of the entire game too. Possibly, in a very coded and secret way, if this is true. You see, if you look closer at this Death Stranding title and image, it's got 11 letters connected by 8 long strands, running down to the ground. And 11 and 8 is also the release date of the game, come to find out, being November 8th, 2019, which also is the year of the whale. That's significant too, since this game's title is named after the cetacean stranding thing, or what's more commonly referred to as beached whales and or dolphins, a pretty unique but somewhat common phenomenon that has still yet to find a universally accepted reason as to why it happens. Now, you might think we're looking too far into this, and this title and picture relation is reaching a bit, and this all going way back to the meaning of Death Stranding, the term and title. Well, if you think that's a bit much, I can't really blame you. That sounds pretty out there, and in most circumstances, I would say it's just a coincidence too, but also, if you keep in mind who the creative force is behind this game, then you know, this is par for course when examining one of his projects. I'm of course talking about Hideo Kojima, who is the lead designer and head artist behind this Death Stranding game, and he's also become known over the years for doing lots of head-scratching, deep, weird, and clever things in his video game productions. Kojima is what they call an auteur video game maker, meaning he treats this as high art, like a painter drawing a large, complex piece on an expansive canvas, or a really creative and insightful filmmaker like, say, Martin Scorsese or something. And most notably, Hideo Kojima worked on almost the entire Metal Gear Solid franchise, writing and directing almost all the entries. And since he just left that company and series in 2015, Death Stranding then is even more anticipated because it's not only Kojima's first game outside of the Konami studio system, but also it's his first major video game release outside of the Metal Gear Solid series. And we're only getting started on why this game is so hyped too, aside from Kojima being a legend and adding his signature auteur style, which will also include themes inspired by our president, Donald J. Trump. But before we get too far into that, let's just note a few more exciting things about this project, like how this game has a seriously legitimate cast, starring Norman Reedus from Walking Dead for starters. And also, Death Stranding has spent a lot of time scanning every actor's face and body in some of the best looking and most advanced motion capture technology we've seen in a good long while. It's also worth mentioning here that Kojima has also recently announced his new gaming studio will also get into making films soon as well. Not too surprising considering the extensive and elaborate and advanced motion capturing he's been doing for Death Stranding, which is very similar to what's used in Hollywood movies as well. Also, if you're more familiar with Kojima and his games like I am, you would probably react to this and say, really? He's going to start making movies? And that's because Kojima's basically already done that in a number of ways. Not only are his games notorious for being very much story driven and also filled with enough cutscenes to add up to 2 or 3 movies per game, but also even Kojima's Metal Gear Solid 4 game holds 2 world records for longest cutscenes in video game history, coming in at 27 and even 71 minutes long. Not sure Death Stranding will reach those levels of epic cutscenes, but I wouldn't be surprised if it did or came close either. They did all that motion capturing, so why not use a lot of it? And also, with all that said, Kojima moving on to make movies isn't a big surprise either. Perhaps you could call it a tangent at most, but it's a welcome one at that. Now, since we got through all the other interesting and cool and ominous stuff about this new Death Stranding release and how it's going to make a splash on the scene for better or worse, next, let's finally talk about the elephant in the room here. Kojima recently came out and said the game is inspired a lot by the division in the world today, particularly that theme and its relation to both President Donald J. Trump in America and also the Brexit movement happening currently in the United Kingdom. And at first glance, this could seem pretty worrisome. We've seen many game makers and movies and TV shows come out recently based on these themes like this, and it's usually 99% of the time anti-conservative, pro-liberal propaganda that's bashing us and Trump and calling us racist and whatnot. But in this case, I say we shouldn't be too quick to judge Death Stranding here. Knowing Kojima's work and background, this could very well be a good and interesting thing to do. Not only is Kojima an outsider from here, he's from Japan, and perhaps he can see and comment on these American and British trends in a more balanced and fair way because of that. But also, in addition, this game's producer has a good record of doing this and attacking both sides sides evenly in the past, and being overall level in his commentary and criticizing both sides of politics too. And he produces content all walks of life can enjoy regardless of political affiliations. Well, if you like long, serious, serialized action games with sometimes lengthy but very interesting cutscenes, that is. For more information on Death Stranding, Kojima, and how his project is inspired by Trump, let's turn to an article from GameSpot called "Kojima Says Death Stranding Was Inspired by Trump and Brexit." Check this one out. Hideo Kojima makes his politics pretty clear in a new documentary, saying Kojima Productions' first title, Death Stranding, is inspired by recent political events and situations. Kojima spoke candidly to BBC Radio 1 Newsbeat about the current political climate, referencing President Donald Trump and Brexit as inspirations for the game's themes. Trump is building a wall and the UK is leaving the EU, Kojima told BBC Radio 1 reporter Stefan Powell. In the game, we use bridges to connect things, but destroying those bridges can instantly turn them into walls, so bridges and walls are almost synonymous. That's one of the things I'd like players to think about in the game. So far so good then. Instead of focusing too much on the specifics and trying to reference and shame Trump directly, like how so many woke video games have tried to do and failed at in the past, well, instead, here, Death Stranding is just addressing the greater themes of building walls and exiting unions, like what's happening in the real world. And this also reminds me of how, so far, Kojima has only addressed and been influenced by broader, undeniable facts and larger themes. Like, for example, Trump's era has certainly seen some more division come to our country. There's no denying that Trump winning the election caused many to lose their minds and spiral out of control. Now, many would like to blame Trump directly for that, but I think many others would say it's the radical liberals' own damn fault for not being balanced and adult and sane enough to deal with an election loss. In addition, this later stated building a wall and Brexit stuff is all fact-based observations too. So far, nothing alluded to by Kojima or his team has been direct, opinion-based things, and that's great because this means, like with all good games and most themes in Kojima games, it's all left open to interpretation, and they're not taking sides. You can look at this as if it's a work of art, and you can look at it and see what you want to see, instead of having pro-liberal, anti-Trump themes shoved directly down your throat, like what usually happens. Kojima says the era of today is about individualism, and uses that as a means to examine the increased loneliness in our ever-connected world. The attacks and violence seen online these days is out of control, so I designed this for people to take a step back and by connecting, relearn how to be kind to others. Kojima said, after spending dozens of hours in the game, you will come back to reality in the end. When you do, I want you to use what you learned in the game. Connecting is one of those things. Kojima also spoke openly about his own battles with loneliness and how he hopes people will empathize with the messaging behind Death Stranding. I'm very prone to loneliness. I think there are similar people around the world, especially gamers. Even though they're having fun with others outside when they are alone and playing video games in their living room, they don't feel like they fit into society or their community. So when those people play this game, they realize people like them exist all over the world. Knowing that even though I'm lonely, there are other people like me makes them feel at ease. Well, I gotta say, I'm still on board with this 100%. It's making me want to play this game this weekend even more actually, because it's pretty clear the Trump inspiration is there. But then at the same time, Kojima quickly pivots to focusing on the themes and subjects he wants to that's related to all this stuff. Loneliness is a real side effect of this modern internet-connected world we're living in, oddly enough. So perhaps this new game story will take that to an extreme and then encourage you to treat others like humans in the end if you choose, like what's implied here. That makes sense too, with the announced multiplayer aspect of Death Stranding that's set to happen as well, where you can apparently have co-op missions with other players online. And with this theme in mind too, you'll probably be learning to work together again, if I had to guess. And that all relates to what seems to be a more isolated trend in this game's story, and how this is related to current events like Trump and Brexit is pretty tangential at best. And perhaps there is some criticism to it as well, but it's being done in such a subtle and nuanced way, I personally don't feel offended at all. In fact, I would even say I feel a bit enlightened, and perhaps even curious or interested in where this side of things could lead. It is rather ironic that countries like the United States and the United Kingdom are both mounting large populist-led movements to break off our countries and become more independent and isolated, which seems a bit counterintuitive to modern days with technology making us all more connected now than ever. And then this focus Death Stranding has on isolation producing loneliness, while it is being applied to a more extreme scenario in the game, it is worth considering in the real world too. Perhaps our side should think about loneliness as a possible side effect from building walls and becoming more of an isolationist nation that allows less immigration. I don't think there's much to worry worry about currently or in the near future, but it is an interesting thought, and it's something that could become an issue if we moved even further to the extreme towards isolationism, which could lead to blowing off our allies completely and cutting off communication from other countries as well. Not going to happen anytime soon, but Kojima does have an interesting point, and his premise is, again, of course, exaggerated and taken to an extreme in this game's case, a game which I think is set in the distant future or in some kind of alternate timeline at least. The reviews have finally rolled in, and Death Stranding has received generally favorable praise from critics. In our own review, editor Callie Plage said, "Death Stranding is a hard game to absorb. There are many intertwining threads to its plot, and silly names, corny moments, and heavy exposition belie an otherwise very simple message. That comes through much more clearly in the game's more mundane moments, when you find a desperately needed ladder left behind by another player, or receive a letter from an NPC thanking you for your efforts. It's positive without ignoring pain. In fact, it argues in both its story and its gameplay that adversity itself is what makes things worth doing and life worth living. It's a game that requires patience, compassion, and love, and it's also one we really need right now." Okay, cool. Sounds like we got through this whole article without getting the usual anti-Trump bashing, even though the writer appeared to be wanting that. No, there was no Kojima calling conservatives bigots or going completely pro-immigration or anything like that. Perhaps you could say the anti-isolation themes here are a bit leaning towards the pro-migrant side, but it's all done in such a subtle, tasteful, and indirect way, I really can't complain here. I mean, like how I implied before, if critics of conservative values and platforms would approach their criticisms of us in ways like how Kojima is here, perhaps we might even listen more. But instead of being more subtle and reasonable like him, liberals just go completely in the opposite direction and to the extreme. We don't want more migrants here, and now they say we should bring all of them here. And for example, we don't like overt and over-the-top LGBTQ propaganda. Well, now the left is going to push it even harder and force it even further down our throats. In the end, I have to say, I'm looking more forward to this game now than ever. I know it seems odd and different and a weird kind of thing, but that's what makes it look so cool to me too. And knowing their inspirations come from dominant current events and prominent figures in politics like Trump and Brexit, well, it's good to see them comment and be inspired by those themes while also not directly going after them specifically, like how many more left-leaning games have in the past. And seeing this happen is definitely a breath of fresh air. What do you guys think? Are you going to play Death Stranding this weekend? Do you think the game is going anti-Trump, or is it subtle and well thought out like how I said? Finally, do you want to see me make another video about Death Stranding and possibly play the game myself and show you guys some of the footage? If you do, hit that like button and comment more Death Stranding below. If I get, say, 5,000 likes and many comments, I'll go ahead and buy the game and start playing and recording it for you guys. And then I can share my thoughts with you later on as well. Until then though, thanks again for watching No Bullshit. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you all next time.